Let's begin then. Let us all bring our palms together. To make our reverential veneration to the perfect one, the undefeated one, the unvanquished one, the fount of all wisdom, an ocean of compassion, and the epitome of loving kindness. As we bring our palms together, let us remind ourselves that this is not a mere mark of our respect or obeisance. It is a pledge of our allegiance to Nibbāna, the path to Nibbāna, and the practice that we must all undertake to achieve the ultimate bliss of Nibbāna. So with that in mind, let us chant the Namaskara, take refuge in the Noble Triple Gem, observe the precepts, and then invite the countless sentient beings to join us and be amongst us, to rejoice in these wonderful merits that we are about to acquire, and to free all sentient beings, once and for all, from suffering. Please join me to chant the Namaskara and start today's proceedings. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So this being the first Sunday of the month, yesterday I don't get any food from you all, right? That's how I'm supposed to remember. But today is the day you give the gift of giving. You were very good at the beginning, when we first started that tradition. But as of late, you've not been great at that. Frankly, maybe it's not you, I think I've not been great at that. Because although I can give you an explanation as to why I am allowed to take my meals after 12, that is when I'm not sick, or rather when I am sick, or when I'm not unwell. No, I keep saying that. When I'm unwell, I cannot give that explanation or offer that explanation by hanging a board around my neck as I walk around for alms after 12. So if I'm late to leave this place, usually any time past 11:30, then I'm not able to go on alms round. Because by the time we get to wherever and get out of the car, it's already 10 to 12, something like that. And that's barely enough time to get my alms bowl out for the two of our monks and get outside and go from door to door. So I was just wondering whether it would be okay with you if on this Sunday, the first Sunday of the month, if you still wish to give that gift of giving, that's up to you. I'm quite okay with whatever. I'm really happy with whatever you want to do. So the choice is yours. Because this is your opportunity, right? So whether you want to do it that way or this way, that's totally up to you. I'm completely fine with whatever you decide. Because there are other places I can go now around, at the monastery or around the village where we are. But when I'm here on a Sunday, you have chosen to offer that day. That's the point. So you can we can do one of three things. One, we can go back to this being a regular Sunday. Meaning, it's up to you, you can bring alms and offer it to the monks. That's one. Number two, we can do what we have been doing as of late, not let me leave sometimes past 12:30, sometimes past 1, and then I cannot go on arms because I cannot offer the explanation I offer to you publicly. So, we can't have a town crier. Asau, asau. Andhra is not well. So we can't do that. Alternatively, on these Sundays, as in the first Sunday of the month, so this is the third option, is we keep those conversations very brief, if at all, on that Sunday. So unless there's something that really cannot wait until the following Sunday, then again, this is not my plead to you, it's only a suggestion, okay? So it's totally up to you. This is a choice that the Dharmista Rajagiriyans made. So it's your choice to make, it's your offering, and it's your choice to withdraw. I have no say in this matter, only to offer the options to you. Because I remember you truly and heartfully rejoiced the day I said, would you like to give the gift of offering? Or the gift of giving? And you were very happy about that. So perhaps you have been thinking that that has been happening, but it's not. Because when I know it's past 11:30, then once we get into the car, the Anagarika Mahatya asks, Sir, Swaminatha, do we go on arms round today? I said, no, not possible. Let's head back to the monastery. So you don't get that opportunity then to give the gift of giving. But if we can maybe not have those lengthy conversations, revisions, reviews, reflections, contemplations, comprehension questions, discussions, and all that, on this Sunday, the first Sunday of the month, and keep it maybe for one of the other 3 Sundays, or sometimes one of the other 4 Sundays, then we can go back to doing what you always wanted to do and what you always thought you were doing, but is not happening now. So is it option 1, 2, or 3? You have to decide unanimously. Number 1 is, we go back to being it a regular Sunday, so you bring in your sandwiches and offer it to Swaminatha like you normally do. Number 2, we stick to what we do right now, which is you completely ignore the fact that I cannot take meals after 12, and therefore I cannot be seen to be taking meals after 12. That's the real thing. I cannot be seen to be taking meals after 12 because I cannot go around giving explanations as to why I do. There's only one condition upon which the Buddha has waived that rule, and that is if you're unwell. And fortunately for you, it's one thing or the other. I'm always unwell. It's either a sore throat, or it's a bad back, or some part of the body is always faulty. So it's usually when Guru Handro's out, it's the throat. Because that is the part of my body that I'm using the most, right? So the Buddha has not prescribed which conditions. So he's just said, if you're unwell, then you are waived. That condition is waived, or rather that rule has been waived for that duration of time. So typically, something or the other is always wrong with this thing. And the third option is, you keep those conversations very brief, or cut it out altogether. You can come and make your venerations, that's fine. I will give you my blessing. You don't have to be here for me to give you my blessings. You have my blessings anyway. My blessing to you is to teach you how to become your own blessing. That is the truest blessing of all. Because otherwise, what's going to happen to you when I'm not here? I cannot be irresponsible like that, can I? What does a responsible parent do? Help their child become independent, right? So I have to be the same. I cannot teach you how to be dependent on me for your blessings. Then that is irresponsible. Therefore, my task is to show you how you can be independent on your practice, with your practice, and become your own source of blessing. So therefore, you don't have to walk up here for your blessings, but it's perfectly fine for you to do that. It's a very customary, it's a lovely thing to do, and therefore you're always welcome to do that. No, I have no hesitation or nothing against that. It's perfectly fine. You can all come if you want, just not all together, one at a time. But then we have to keep those conversations either short or none at all. Otherwise, the clock keeps ticking, and then when we go down, and even after we've used the washrooms and had some gilampasa before we go out, there's barely any time to go on arms round. So what is it going to be? 1, 2, or 3? 3? 3? Going once. 3? Go. Going? Go. Okay, 3 going. Right. So let's do it that way then. And the other thing is, when you let me go on arms round, okay, I can come back and relate to you the wonderful stories, the things that happen, and how people make use of that opportunity, which is even more, which gives back something to you as well. Gives you an opportunity to rejoice in this wonderful gift of giving. As of late, you've not heard anything from me, have you? Did it not cross your mind why that must be? Why does Swami Nasi not say anything about Pindapata? It's because I've got nothing to say. Because I've not been on Pindapata. You've been spoiling me. So this Pindapata is a very beautiful tradition. And sometimes individuals, devotees ask, Swami Nasi, don't you get any exercise? Shouldn't you get some exercise like we do? Like, do you not need to go to the gym or something? So the short answer to that is, the Buddha did prescribe a form of exercise, but he weaved it with the tradition of Pindapata. So it didn't look like we were actually going out for exercise, but we were. Walking is a really good form of exercise. A very, very good form of exercise. So that is how us monks get our exercise. And because it was a daily routine, then we always got exercise. Therefore, monks were always quite healthy enough, fit enough to live long, at least until they got their job done. And so eat in moderation. Mattanyutacha bhattasmin is an advice the Buddha has given us. Eat in moderation. Take your meal, taking into account how much energy you need to spend the rest of the day, because it was always one day at a time. So monks back then, they didn't have fridges. They didn't store for the following day. It was always live for the day, because who knows, tomorrow might never come. So we never stored food. Like we do now sometimes in temples and monasteries. For convenience, we tend to do that. But back in those days, food wasn't always cooked in a monastery. So monks went out on Pindapata. But then back then, people were familiar with the tradition of Pindapata, so people expected Swami Mahasajas to come on Pindapata. But nowadays, if monks tend to rely on that, then they'd be hungry half the time, because people are not familiar with this tradition of Pindapata, which is also one reason why I want to introduce that. Not necessarily introduce, that's the wrong word to use, but to help people become more familiar. I think in villages, in rural parts of the country, they get to see that, they get to experience that, but people here are just the same as people there. So why shouldn't the Colombians enjoy, rejoice, and partake in the beautiful tradition of Pindapata, right? Us monks belong to them as well. The Buddha belongs to them as well. It's all of us that have protected and preserved the Sambuddha Sasana. The thing is, back then they didn't have these tall walls that covered the whole house and you couldn't see what was going on outside. Back then it was just I don't know, what do you call it? Just fences, indeed, fences of bamboo fences and sorts. So whatever was going on out on the street, people could see. And then there was a dog at home, and usually when someone was approaching the house, the dog would announce to the householder, and they get to know that this is the Swaminathan. And so even the way the dog barked was different. So the householders knew, okay, the monks are here on Pindapata. And therefore, the first and foremost of whatever was prepared at home was always offered to the Swaminathan. Swaminathan meaning the sasana, meaning Nibbāna. Therefore, what was supreme was always offered to what was supreme. And that is why back then, we had always an abundance. We never imported our food, least of all our rice. These days we import our rice as well. We import our rice, we import our coconuts, we import our fruit, we import our vegetables, we import just about everything. We import our milk. Those days it was not so. We were self-sufficient. We were self-sufficient for food, we were self-sufficient for medicine, because medicines grew in the garden. Herbs. You didn't have to go to the pharmacy. There was a pharmacy at home. If you still have your grandparents or your great-grandparents, they may still have some of this still lingering around, these old traditions. But now, this is all washed away. When globalization came and westernization came and we forgot our roots, and commercialization and consumerization and all that came along, and we forgot who we were, we forgot our traditions, we forgot our rituals, our rites, who we are, who we were. And now we're just, like clowns at a circus. I don't know if there's any way we can turn this around. And it was never my intention to turn the whole society around, it's not that, but you are all members of society. Your home, your family members, that is also a community. If whatever little I can share with you, you can take home with you and share some of it with your friends, your family, your children, your siblings. And if you can make a little bit of what was Sri about Lanka, whatever was Sri about Lanka, if you can bring back a little bit of that into your homes, then that's enough. Not everyone is destined for Nibbāna yet. The Sihela tradition, not the Sinhala tradition, the Sihela tradition was always geared towards Nibbāna, ladies and gentlemen. Everything we did with purpose. From waking up in the morning, offering a glass of water to the Buddha, before placing your feet on the ground, to make a determination that I shall live today with compassion and loving kindness towards all sentient beings, silu prana bhuten kiri hitanukampiyo katutu kar, all that. This is all done with purpose. That set the day right. Everything was right from there on. Even if the outcomes weren't right, the intentions were always right. And how the children would always worship their parents before they set out. You didn't need any other insurance after that. That was your insurance. The blessings that you got and the intentions with which, just the sheer power of those blessings, that was enough. That's why I sometimes, spend a few minutes talking to you about these things, to try and ensure that you have a little bit of that, at least, to whatever extent you can, at home. If your parents are still alive, then please make use of that opportunity. They're not going to be around forever. So before you head out, whether it's to go out to school or to go to work, It shouldn't be just because you're still at school going age, you worship your parents, but after you start doing jobs, you shouldn't. Is that so? Is that so? Once you start doing a job, you need not worship your parents. Is that so? Why do they stop being parents all of a sudden? I worshipped my parents till the last day I was at home. It was the day on which the last day I went out to work. I worshipped my parents. Even when I used to go to the shop, whenever I step outside, if I knew that I was going to be outside for some time, then I would always go and worship my mother, my father, if they were at home. And they would place a peck on my forehead. And that was a way of us exchanging our affection with one another. So that was how Appaji told me that he loved me. He was always there for me. That's how Amma always reminded me, I'm always there for you, not to worry. Whenever things go bad, I'm always there for you. Don't you worry. So that was, just that thought that there were two people who cared about me more than they cared about anything else in the world. And the fact that I must always be mindful about my conduct. Because wherever I am, whatever I do, I represent them. I would not do anything that would later on, that people would question, who are your parents? Who brought you? Who's taught you these dirty things? I would never conduct myself in that manner. So all that was part of our routine. It was part of the rituals at home. So, in your homes, as much of this as possible, I suggest you do. If you're already doing it, then that's great. If not, then see what you can do in your homes. And always set a good example to your children. So even if you're 50, and you have your children with you, and you have your parents with you, it's not, worshipping your parents is not just something we do for Aurudu. It will become that, eventually. Once a year, you worship your parents. It's like once a year, go to the temple, observe Sil. Like once a year, you have your birthday. It's not an ad. It's not just one of those things you have to do once a year. When you realize why you do it with purpose, then it becomes part of your everyday routine. So the pharmacy was at home. Your mother was at home. Your father was at home. They were there for you. And as bhikkhus, when we went out on Pindapata, there was always someone at home. Typically, there was always someone at home. Therefore, every household had the opportunity to earn merits. Every day was a day of merits. Usually, monks go out in the morning, right? So, let's say by that time the father's gone out, but the mother was at home, and every day there would be a Sangika Dane at home. You didn't have to necessarily invite the Swaminasis in, sit them down, but the Sangika Dane is not always like that. As long as there was a Sangya Vahanse and a Dane was done, there was a Sangika Dane. So just imagine doing that every day of the year. How much fortune must that bring? So you get that once a week. Just imagine having that every day of the year. That was what we were like. But then the walls went up. The iron gates went up. The barbed fences went up. CCTV cameras went out. Watching out for any threats. So, the whole idea was, let's keep as many of them out as possible. Back those days, it was not that. Back then it was, let's invite as many of them in as possible. In some homes, they used to have a water decanter. Even in some villages I've seen this. They used to have a water decanter and it just has the word ping. Pintaliya. So the householder would fill it up, a pot of water, they would fill it up and just say, any bypasser, anyone who was tired, anyone who needed some refreshment, anyone who needed a drink of water, please help yourself. And even in some other homes I've seen, sometimes when people, just random strangers, say, people would come up saying, if you really saw that they were perhaps someone from another village, because people knew everyone in the village, right? It was a closed community, a small community. They were not massive communities, and even if they were, people knew each other because they had time to mingle. They had time to get to know each other. People were not so preoccupied as they are today. Today, all your friends are on Facebook and on social media. They're on LinkedIn. But back then, they didn't have any of this stuff. So if you needed to get to know someone, you had to go and talk to them. Today, you don't need to talk to them. You can thumb them. You don't have to talk to them. So there was always a face, no emojis back then. It was the real face-to-face interaction. So, people couldn't keep their emotions hidden. We're not very good at hiding our emotions. You know that. As human beings, we cannot hide our emotions for very long. Right? Your smile, we know it's either a genuine smile or a fake smile. But when you are on the back of a smartphone, on the other end of a smartphone, then a smile is always a smiley. So then, as long as you can stitch your words together appropriately, and then you have these grammar checkers that will tell you the tone isn't right. So you can reset your tone and make sure the tone is consistent, right? So all that is now artificial. I don't know what about us is natural anymore. It seems everything is just artificial. We are coming to a point where now artificial human beings, no longer are we natural. So with all that artificiality replacing naturalness or naturality, is that a word? Naturality? Naturality. If it's not, I've just coined it. We've lost that humanness that wove the fabric of society, of our communities. That's why we don't have that community feeling anymore. I truly feel that sometimes, this community you're here, you probably feel more connected to each other than perhaps you do in your communities outside. Because there's a shared purpose here. You know that no one's here to get something from you, take something from you, grab something from you, leave you stranded. You know that people here care, and because it's through caring we can get what we want. You can't get what you want. If you want Nibbāna, you can't do that by taking it away from someone, taking someone else's happiness. It is only by giving happiness you get happiness. But our culture was based in this Sihela tradition, and therefore people knew that whatever you wanted in life, you had to give it first. So therefore, in families where they knew this stuff, they didn't learn it at school, they learned it from the temple. They learned it from the monks, they learned it from their spiritual leaders, and they had time to associate with them. Because there was plenty of time to go to the temple. There was plenty of time to seek spiritual guidance, which is not something we have today. You know some of this, and you have gone through some of this, because I think we are all at an age where we are at that age where we saw that transition. Some of you are at that age. You were there when that transition happened, that shift in culture, where we lost that Sihela-ness and we just became Singhalese. It's a Singhalese, isn't a lease of lionness. But we were Sihela. We were bound, we were destined for greatness, and everything we did was anchored in that. That's why I say, back then they had this pintali, a pot of water. And I was going to say, there were times where when we saw that there was someone from an outside village, an outsider, and if they particularly were traveling on foot, typically that was how it was done back then, although they had bullock carts and stuff. If they realized that they were an outsider, they always helped make that person feel welcome, the traveler feel welcome. And so they would say, this is complete strangers. If the bullock cart or the outsider traveled just outside their homes, they would say, would you stop for a cup of tea? or maybe some Tamili. You're like, what? To a stranger? It feels strange now, but it wasn't back then. So there were always king coconuts at home. Some of it for home use, some of it to be given. And it didn't matter who it was that it was given to. So if there was a bypasser who it looked like they were tired, exhausted, needed a drink of water or needed some replenishment, then that was offered to them. For how much? That's the thing. How much never really came into the question. It never really mattered, this how much. But today everything has a how much, right? It wasn't how much, it was how well back then. How well? How well can I do this? Not how much is this? So, I'm not just saying this back then, just for sentimental value or just to remind you what you've lost, what would be the point of that. What I'm suggesting is, these were things we did in the past, and I want you to think about the purpose behind all that. What sort of values we must have had, our ancestors must have had. And unfortunately, although they passed down their genes, what hasn't passed down necessarily were those values and those virtues. So genetics have passed down. That's how you are here. But unfortunately, those views, those indoctrinations, those values, those virtues, and partly I think it is our responsibility as spiritual guides, leaders, whatever you want to call us, to remind our people that these were the traditions and virtues and values that we upheld. And all that was done for one reason, because all of those things were part of charity, giving. The other day we talked about Dhima and Dana, remember? People knew that to get to Nibbāna, Dana was something that was essential. So Dana didn't just happen at the temple. It happened between individuals of the same community. Back then they had common wells. If there was someone who knew how to dig a well, they would dig it in some part of the village, and everyone was welcome to come and get their water from there. So there was no owner to the well. But today every well has an owner. Even if it's a tube well, it has an owner. Isn't that so? Today everything has an owner. Land has an owner. The tree in the land, that has an owner. See, your coconut tree at home, that has an owner, right? Therefore the fruits that grow on the tree, that has an owner. And the moment something has an owner, now it is no longer Dana. Now it becomes Dhima. Do you understand how that works? Because whenever something has an owner, then you are the one who owns it, and then you give it to someone else. So you transfer ownership, right? That is a Dhima, not a Dana. The concept of Dana is where there is no such thing called an owner. Now, when we study the Dhamma, what is it that you have begun to realize? Is your right hand yours? What about your left hand? Is any part of your body yours? Is your husband yours? Is your wife yours? Are your children yours? Is your house yours? No, you have begun to understand that all of these are mere conceptual fabrications, right? This sense of ownership. See, how long did we have to live to finally come to that realization? How old are you now? See, you're that old before you came to that realization. But then our ancestors, they learnt it from 6 years of age. By the time they were 12, they'd already understood that these things are not owned, they're merely used. So people used what they needed. They never abused. They used what they needed. So there was a bit of land that needed to be used. A house needed to be built, and it was used. I mean, sometimes it seems really bizarre to even think about how they must have, like, their mindset and how they worked, and these social interactions. Sometimes we talk about, sometimes you read them in books about our past, about our history. And sometimes it's actually just very baffling to think, how did people actually work like that? Because today we are a lot more focused on our personal space, ourselves, our sense of identity, our sense of personality, our sense of ownership, our family units, these unitary abstractions that we today take for granted. Back then it was very, very alien to them. Back in those days, people didn't see humans in that way. I'm talking about maybe 70, 80, 90, 100 years ago. Perhaps even a bit longer than that, a bit further than that. Now, 100 years ago would be a previous generation. No, many years, a lot before that. Perhaps maybe 500, 600 years ago. But then now we are at the tail end of that. So there's a little bit of that left, because your grandmothers, your grandfathers, they know about this stuff, but now they're coming to terms with how this society has transformed. And therefore to them it's quite foreign and very alien, some of the ways in which we work and we do things today. So the concept of hoarding is very alien. Perhaps your grandmother will be like, why do we need all of this? Why can't we just share? So sharing and caring was really just part of who they are. But these are some of those things that we've lost in the process. So we've become very good at existence. That's what we've become very good at, existence. But the Sihela culture was not based around existence. It was based on a foundation of extinction. We were born to become extinct. Does that even make sense? To be born to become extinct? Does it? Does that agree with your thoughts now, based on the Dhamma? You are born to become extinct. So self-preservation was not the agenda. It was self-extinction. Therefore, everything they could do, the way that they thought, the way that they worked, the way that they operated, the way that the family got together, the way that, even like, see, Aurudu. Today it has become very commercialized. Back then it was not like that. Today it has become very competitive, because we are very competitive in whatever we do. I mean, competition is just all over the place now, isn't it? You build a house and it has to be better than your neighbors. I know, there's nothing you can do about it, because that's the way the world is now. But if you go back many years, those houses are nowhere to be seen anymore, because they were just thatched houses made of mud, clay, because they were not meant to last forever, because people had far more important things to do than build houses that lasted forever, because they came in for extinction, not to live forever, not to last forever. And they didn't create things, build things that would then be passed on from generation to generation to generation, which seems to be the way that we do things now. Because aren't you really worried that if you don't provide for your children, no one will look after them? Don't you have that fear in your mind? That if you didn't provide for your children, no one would look after them, and they would be defenseless. They would be, there would be nothing to fend for themselves. Therefore, what we tend to do is we try and earn not just enough for us and for the few years we are going to be alive, but we tend to earn for many generations to come. So that our children and their children and their children and their... We tend to earn so that we can have many generations of our children, our people, my people, can live without having to rely and depend on others. That way of thinking does not support a community cohesive feeling. It goes completely against that. Because it doesn't become a case of let's all look after each other. That community strength is gone. It becomes a very siloed, let's look after my own people. I have to do something to look after my people, and their people, and their people, and their people. Do you not realize that there's a lot of selfishness in that strand of thinking? See, back then it was not so, because the whole community looked after each other. So parents were never worried that if I didn't look after my children, or if I didn't leave enough for my children and their children, they would be left stranded. Parents didn't have that fear. There was no such worry. Because it was the whole community that looked out. Haven't you seen a herd of elephants? On TV, at least. They all look after the pack, don't they? So it doesn't matter whose baby elephant it is. Everyone looks after everyone. But we are not like that. Is it not time we took a few lessons from animals? Because that's very natural. That's why. See, they don't go to school to learn that stuff, do they? Have you seen an elephant going to school? They don't go to school to learn that stuff because it's very natural. That's how nature works. We all look after each other. But what happened to us humans? We went to school, that's what happened. Like we talked about last week. We went to school. And what did they teach us at school? To look after ourselves. Look after oneself. Oneself. So we started to look after oneself. Oneself, so myself and my people. So is my people. My people meaning my family. The people who live under my roof. Those are the people. Therefore the walls had to go up. Why? To protect myself from my neighbors. It became a very private affair. The more private you become, the further you move from Nibbāna. Remember that. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. The more private you become, to the extent where, to take a very simple example, if you have your own room at home, I'm serious. This might sound like something very trivial, but it is true. If you have your own room at home, you are one step away from Nibbāna than those who don't. If you have your own bed, if you have your own plate, if you have your own mug, if you have your own chair, that's your chair, no one else sits on that chair. See? That's why at the monastery we don't have any of that. We don't have our own rooms, we don't have our own beds. We have an alms bowl, but that's no different to anyone's. We are offered an alms bowl the day we come into robes. For hygiene reasons, we use the same alms bowl. We have our own robes, our own toothbrushes and so on. It's hygiene reasons, right? But besides that, everything is common, shared. See, how many items do you have that you say are your personal items, your personal belongings? Your phone, your car, your money, your bank account. your plate, your mug, your house, your sofa, your chair, your wall hangings. See? Your pots, your plants. Each item that you claim as yours is another step further away from Nibbāna. That's why Guru Handra says, Gihi Vataka Sita. Nibbāna dakinne kesayද? How can Nibbāna be possible? It's not the presence of the object, it's the personal connection that you have with it. That feeling of personalness. As long as you get the idea, I don't mind what you call it. The personal feeling that you have, something being personal, like if this is your personal cup, it's mine. So if anyone drinks from it, you feel there's something wrong with that. Hey, get your own, that's mine. What is the inverse of the universe? Self, isn't it? The self is the inverse of the universe. So if you want to wish to become the universe, then the last thing you should be is a self. So when you say, this is my cup, go get your own, what are you saying? I'm a self, I'm an individual, so this is mine. See, you're bidding farewell to Nibbāna. See, how much is this? Come on. For the price of a mug, you bid farewell to Nibbāna? Come on. Is it worth it? You have a think about, how many things you are willing to share. Start at home. I'm not suggesting go share it with everyone. Start at home. Even at home, there will be things that you claim to be yours. These are my personal items. Hygiene, okay, put that to a side, no problem, right? So your clothes, fair enough, yours. Your toothbrush, fair enough, yours. Your razors and all that stuff, right, fair enough, that's all yours. But you need to know why it's yours. If it's for hygiene reasons, that's a reasonable argument. Then that does not get in the way of your Nibbāna then. Because you don't want any infections or any diseases to contract for yourself or to pass it down to someone else. So there the purpose is different, right? It's not personalizing something for the sake of that. Therefore it's fine. But think about other things, like if you have your own bed and it's your personal bed. Now at the monastery we don't have that. So what we do is our robes become the bed sheets when we go to bed. So we take our robe off, lay it across the bed so that it's always clean for the next person to come and use the bed. So these robes are long enough so that you can cover the entire bed, because we don't have king-size beds. These are just beds big enough for one, because we don't share it with two people. So it's big enough for one, so the robe is long enough, whereby when you have your pillow, so we don't have personal pillows or pillowcases, we don't even need pillowcases. What we do is we put the robe, the top part of the robe, around the pillow. So we do one fold around the pillow so the pillow is clean, it doesn't get dirty. And then the rest of it we lay out across the bed. So our feet don't really come into contact with the bed itself or the mattress. It's all on the robe. And then these robes are wide enough so that if you feel cold at night, you can wrap yourself with it. See, it's all in one. You have no idea, ladies and gentlemen, how convenient this one piece of fabric is. And yet you wish to wear. Think about it. So we don't have personal beds. So if we don't have a personal bed, then there's no personal room. So we sleep in dormitories. And you come in for the night, see which bed's available, take that bed. Put your robe on, sleep, following morning, get up, take your robe, put it on your body, and you move on. So you don't have beds to make, no pillows to fluff. See how easy it is? No duvets to tuck. That. Because we've got far more important things to do with our time. Home beautification is not what we are in the sasana for. We are here for mind beautification, not home beautification. We live very simple lives. It could be simpler if we didn't need a mattress. Actually, it could be simpler, just lay on the floor. There are some Swaminathanas who choose to just sleep on the floor. There are times in our dormitories, the Noble Hearts, sometimes when a large number of children come in at once and we don't have enough time to make, because we manufacture most of our furniture at the monastery. So we bring in iron, there's a welding plant. So we make our own stuff because it's 3 or 4 times cheaper than buying it from the shops. So otherwise who would have to foot the bill? If we had to buy a bed every time we needed one, who would have to foot the bill? Put your hand up. Yeah, and that weighs very heavily on our shoulders. We don't want to be a burden to you. We want to be as light as a feather, if at all possible. So we make our own stuff, we make our own beds. And we have people who are very skilled at all these industries. That is the beauty of the sasana. You get people from all walks of life coming in. Just imagine, we have now more than 200 monks. Can you imagine how much skill we must have at the monastery? How skilled we must be. And everyone there to support each other. We have become almost invincible. Because no matter what industries you talk about or think of, what skill, we've got it. You name it, we've got it. We've got musicians, we've got plumbers, we've got bricklayers, we've got carpenters, we've got painters, we've got computer technicians, we've got network specialists, we've got security specialists. We've got the lot. So whenever there's a question about anything, you just have to go up to the right person and ask the question, that's it. Typically when you're outside, you have to pay for these things, right? Services. These are services you have to pay for. But not at our monastery. And I'm sharing this with you because it is a huge benefit to you as well. So when we have to find out something, when we need some information, we don't have to go hiring these services because it's all there in-house. Experts in their fields. We have people who know the law. We have lawyers, we have doctors, we have engineers, we have mathematicians, we have teachers, we have scientists, we have chefs. We have everyone. Managers, senior managers, junior managers, supervisors. We got people who've done all sorts of accreditations. Simas, Six Sigmas, all that. From human resource management to energy management to environmental management to agriculture. Experts in these fields. Not just people who just double their hands at it, experts in the fields. That's how we have been able to do so much in such a short span of time. And because everyone comes together and we fuse, that's what happens. We all fuse together because we have a shared purpose. We're all here, one for all and all for one. That is that community feeling that we all have. That is what the Buddha did to us. He united us with his Dhamma. Sukha Sangasa Samaggi. Unity among the Sangha is a source of great joy. Unity. That's why a schism in the Sangha is considered one of the 5 heinous sins. You understand what I mean by a schism? To separate the Sangha, to cause disharmony in the Sangha, is considered a heinous sin. You can't commit that. It's only a high ordained bhikkhu who could do that. Once done by Devadatta Thera. He caused a schism in the Sangha. It's as bad as killing one's mother, or one's father, or killing an arahant, or shaking the blood of the Buddha. A schism in the Sangha is just as evil. Just imagine. Because what happens when you cause a schism in the Sangha? Nibbāna is lost. That's what happens. That's why I'm not a big fan of sometimes things that go on around the country on social media, sometimes fueled by devotees, sometimes fueled by the lay community who are ignorant about what they're really supporting. They're just ignorant. It's just sometimes just a fanfare. They're just sometimes just jumping on the bandwagon, not really knowing what they're subscribing to, what they're commenting on, what they're liking or disliking. I really don't want any of you to get involved in any of that. Don't judge whether a monk is right or wrong. Leave that to the monks. You should only be a judge of your own character. That's it. Be a judge of your own character. These days, some what they call robe bearers, chivaradari, right? They're on the news, apparently someone said, for you know what. So don't you be the judge of whether that is right or wrong. There's a law, there's a system in the country to process such. If it's a criminal act, then they will handle that. But don't be the one who kind of speaks on behalf of the lay community. Don't be the one who has to judge the monastic community or says this is right, that is wrong. Let them deal with that. If you see a Swami Nohan if you see them on news for good or bad, just leave it to them. Because I really don't want you to get involved in any of that stuff. Because once you do, it's like, you get sucked into it, like it's like a black hole. You get sucked into it. And the thing is, monks are, if not today, tomorrow, they get into good community. They find a teacher. Unlike the lay community, monks are always exposed and have the privilege of being presented with a good teacher. Right? So one of these days, you will end up telling off or admonishing or saying something bad about some Swami Nohan, and then he or she comes to the realization that his conduct is not appropriate, and then they go find a teacher and they get instruction from the teacher. They put aside their bad habits, their old ways, and on that day they become a Sotapanna. Just assume that, because these things can happen overnight. And from there on, anything you start saying about them, anything bad, becomes an arupavada. Now how can you wash that off? Once you start desecrating what is noble, what is desecrated is your path to Nibbāna. So don't make yourself a victim in that. Don't put yourself into that position. So the best thing to do is see whether the Dhamma is right for you and take the Dhamma. So if you ever see Swami or anyone, either Swami Nohan saying that, what I'm saying is wrong, censuring me, or anyone at our monastery, maybe it's Guru Handro or me or anyone else for that matter, please don't go commenting on that or saying, how dare you do this, do you know how good he is? Right? Don't get involved in that. If you are good, then please don't do that. And if someone says that we are good, then just read that and rejoice. That's it. You be the judge of your own character, not someone else's. Because always we have a tendency to always judge individuals. And the worst is when you start judging individuals in robes, or the monastics or clergy, because they're always exposed and have the privilege of coming across the truth, be that a father in the church, be that the imam in the mosque, or a teacher at the temple. So one sermon, one lecture, and the whole thing can change. Their whole persona can change, their whole ways, their way of thinking, their value set, all that can change just overnight. We must not get ourselves into a position where we have to regret what has been said. So anyway, that's another matter. What I asked you to do was think about all these personal things that you have. Even at home, if you have your personal bed, if you have your personal chair, your personal mug, what's a PC after all? What does PC stand for? Personal computer. So it's meant to be personal. Nowadays, everything's meant to be personal, that's the thing. So it's not a car, it's a personal car. It should be a PC. That is also a PC, personal car. So we have personal bank accounts. Everything's personal. So this is good for existence. This is great for existence. To exist, the more you are personal, the longer you can exist. Because what does this personalization give you? Protection, preservation of yourself. That's what it gives you. And that is why people are so focused on that. But when you stop thinking about this person, this personalization, and you diffuse that, when you start thinking outside of those boundaries, and you start thinking about the collective, the whole, then your mind opens up. And that opening up of your mind opens your mind up to the universe, to the truths. The moment you close your mind and you start thinking about yourself, then your mind is closed, and then truths cannot come in through what is closed, because the universe is bigger than you, the truth is greater than you, ladies and gentlemen. The moment you start focusing on you, the truth, you close the door to the truth, because the truth is greater than you. That's why. So if something's greater than you, you can't be like this and accept it to come to you, right? You have to be like this. You have to be open. This openness is so important. I cannot emphasize it enough, how important openness is. To be open, to be genuine, to have integrity, that openness. The more secrets you keep, the more difficult it's going to be to get to Nibbāna. I don't mean share your password with everyone. That's not what I mean. But what is it you are keeping safe with the password? That's what I'm talking about. It's not the password itself, but what are you trying to protect with your password? It's something that's personal to you, right? That's what I'm talking about. See, now there's a lot about personal information, isn't there? I mean, we have laws, rules, regulations about personal information, the Personal Information Act, and so on. It's becoming big now, I think, in Sri Lanka as well. Back those days it was in the UK and other countries, but it's becoming huge now. I remember when I was, the last few years I worked at the bank. What was it? There was some act that came out. Data protection, but something more specialist than that. It was about a GDP, yes. What was it? Not GDP? GDPR, yes. I can't remember what the acronym stands for. General Data Protection Act. GDPR? Regulation. Thank you. So that was big about how you collect information, store it, delete it, and give people the freedom to choose what bits of information is kept and for how long and all that. So it was around that time I was packing my bags. And now I think it's landed. I think it's been a few years, and now they're starting to slowly regulate that. So you see, this is novel to us, isn't it now? We didn't have that. Just think about it. I'm not saying that there's right or wrong. I'm just saying, just think about it. This was not a Sri Lankan invention, was it? This GDPR stuff, these data protection acts, they're not Sri Lankan inventions. The bullock cart, that's a Sri Lankan invention. But the GDPR, the Data Protection Act, these are not Sri Lankan inventions. We imported them. Just think about it. I know you're intelligent people, so I'm just saying, think about it. It's not my place to question whether it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, think about it. What are we trying to protect? What is the price we are going to have to pay every time we think about protecting this stuff? We are trying to protect ourselves and everything about ourselves, our information, secrecy. Is it important that we do that? Perhaps. In a commercialized world, in what we have built now, we have to sustain, right? The economy and all that, it has to be sustained, the banking system, and there's fraud, there's all that going on, therefore we have to keep ourselves safe, fair enough, but remember, what is it we are keeping safe? Ourselves. That's the problem. So no one's talking about the fact that there is a self, isn't there, that you have to protect. What if you didn't have a self? No one's talking about that, except a few crazy people like us who've really lost the plot. But the vast majority, they're talking about how can we make it more strict, how can we make it more secure? Technology is advancing at blazing speeds. You just can't keep up with it. Encryptions and all that technology is just, overnight these technologies keep on developing and progressing and advancing. Because at the same time, there are the criminals, and they're always trying to get at your information so that they can take what matters to them from you. One might say, well, until you're a victim, of course, you're a philosopher. I was a victim of fraud. At one point, someone stole my identity back in the UK. I only realized that when money went missing from the bank account. And then I went to I rang up the bank, and they were very, very promptly, they restored all that. But, so back then I felt scared. I was like, whoa, what's going on? And we have to further strengthen security measures, because I worked in technology in the bank, so you can imagine what my mindset must have been back then. Keep the bad guys out at whatever cost. But today, I look at this whole thing from a very different perspective. For as long as we have a stomach, we have to think about how do we feed ourselves. But if we can come to a point where we no longer need a stomach, then we don't feel hunger. Then you don't need to go finding food. The Buddha taught us to think about bringing solutions at the root level, not the branches. Pruning branches, how long can you do it? You'll have to keep doing it forever. But if you can uproot a problem, then it's done. That's it, right? So today, if you want my medical records, I will give it to you freely. You don't have to steal it from me. I don't mind, if I get a cancer one day, I'll tell you. So what? What's personal about that? It's just a matter of fact. That's it. What do I have to lose? But if I was in the job market, if I was looking for a spouse, if I was looking for someone to invest in me, now we have a problem. Because the moment they find out that I have a cancer, then I'm no longer a suitor. But, when you come to a point where you have nothing to expect from the world, where your happiness is your own making, then what's personal anymore? So the day I find out I have a cancer, I'll tell you. There's only one thing I won't tell you, the day I become an arahant. That I won't tell you. I'll tell you now when I'm going to become an arahant, one chitta before I die. So until then, don't consider me an arahant. Just think about how free I must feel inside myself. Nothing to protect. Therefore, I don't have to live in fear. I have no wallet that I carry around with me, always having to watch out, check my back pocket. What back pocket? Don't have a back pocket. No pair of keys to make sure that no one nicks it. No car I own. No house. No keys to the house. Nothing. I don't have to go on my smartphone checking my CCTV cameras all the time, seeing what's going on. But, these are things you have to do, unfortunately. I'm sure, even when you're here on a Sunday, you still have your CCTV cameras watching out every corner of your house, and there'll be an alert that will come up on your phone, even if the cat jumps out the wrong window. Because you have something to protect. These are personal things. Now, of course, at the monastery, we have some protection. But, because you might say, you're talking about, you don't have a home. Yes, but you have the monastery. Don't you lock the doors before you go to bed at night? That's not mine. It's the community's. So I don't have a personal worry, is what I'm trying to get across to you. There's no personal worry, no personal fear. That is just bliss. I'm talking about that bliss. You're listening to that bliss. But you can't taste it. I'm trying to tell you how sweet sugar is when you've never tasted it. Would you share your PIN with anyone? What you normally say PIN number, but it's wrong to say PIN and number because N stands for number. Would you share your PIN with just about anyone? No, you wouldn't. I don't have one to share. So you ask me for my PIN, but I don't have one. I have PIN, not PIN. And that PIN I can't share. So, I'm not trying to market monkhood. I'm just saying, think about the peace of mind that I and people like me must have. Don't you want that? Why burden yourself with so much in life when life itself is just a bunch of troubles? When there's so much, and because, this joy, this freedom is there for the taking. This paradise is there for the taking, and when it is, why do you deprive yourself of it? Is the question I have to ask you. You're not the only doctor in the world. There are other doctors. So even if you decide to leave your stethoscope to a side and go and choose the noble life, don't worry, there are still plenty of doctors. Not everyone will follow suit. So, but if you think you're the only doctor in the world, and if you go, then the whole world is going to die, disease and epidemic, no, there are other doctors. Because not everyone's ready for that. But you're kind of taking steps in the right direction. Once again, I'm not trying to market monkhood. What I'm just saying is, think about it. Not monkhood, but think about this peace of mind. Because it's, you're privy to it. It's accessible, it's there. You don't have to carry the burden of complication, confoundedness, this confusion that you have become numb to now. That's what's happened. You've been bearing that for so many years now, so many decades, that you have become numb to it. Haven't you? It just becomes, it's now come to a point where it feels very normal, right? In fact, to acquire another possession, now see, if you already have a house, to acquire another house doesn't seem like too much of a stretch, because it's just another one of these. But do you know, when you inherit another house, how much more housekeeping you also inherit? Because it's not just a house, you have to keep the house. So the housekeeping, because that's another property you have to now keep safe from imposters. It's another house that you have to keep safe from the neighbors, another bunch of neighbors now. It's another house on which you have to pay your taxes, mend the roof, make sure the plumbing is working, sweep, remove the cobwebs, dust, wash, paint, and the list goes on. It's another house. But then, by the time you have two houses, you're now ready for the third house. That's how it works. I've been there. I've been there. When you have two houses, you get used to that. It's like children, isn't it? When you have the first child, you feel like it's a child and a half, right? When you have the first one for the first time. That's just a job when you have your first child. But after a while, what happens? It normalizes, right? You become used to it. You absorb all that extra work, extra burden, extra fears, all that extra pooping and cleaning and pissing and all that at the wrong time, in the middle of the night. Right? All that you accept as part of it becomes just very part of you. And if you give birth to triplets at once, now, then you might say, whoa, I didn't want that. Usually when you wish to become pregnant, no one expects to have twins or triplets or quadruplets for that matter, but it just happens by chance. Sometimes, you have many in one bunch. But typically, it's not what you expect. You just want one, because that's all you're ready for. From 0 to 1 is not that much of a jump. But after you get the one, then you start making plans for the next one. But by the time you've had 2, see, if you had only 1 and someone brought along 2, you wouldn't be ready to accept that. That would be too much to handle. But once you have 2, the third, that's okay. Just think about why that is so. Once you have 3, another one is okay, but you do realize now it's 4. It's not just another 1. That addition of 1 makes it 3 plus 1 is 4. It's not like they bring the 1 and take the other 3 away. You can wish for it, but it doesn't happen like that. When they bring in the 4th, it's the 4th, not 1. But you see, you've now normalized to that. You have accustomed yourself to that. You're now okay to bear all that burden. Don't you do that with every facet of life? Houses, property, boyfriends, girlfriends. You can manage 1, but after you get the 1, 2 is okay. Even at the same time. Some people are like that. They say learning to balance. That's what they call it. I mean, there are some blokes, they can manage 4 or 5 at once. But the first one that they had to learn, it was tough, it was difficult. Then they got the hang of it. Then 2 at once was okay, 3 at once was okay. Then he got caught out, then he learned a lesson from that. To keep different phones for different relationships, you can't have the same phone across all relationships. Right? Then the 4th one. So you learn your techniques and your tactics and your strategies. And this is the same thing you've been doing with the rest of your life as well. But here's the thing, right? All of this eats up your time. You don't get 2 lots of 24 hours when you have your second child, or your second flat, or your second bank account. Do you? You don't get 2 lots of 24 hours. You don't get a 3rd lot of 24 hours when you have another child and as well as another house. So we tend to normalize with all this and just keep on accepting and acquiring, not realizing that there's a huge price that you're paying for all this. And this is because our mindsets are now, how can I provide for my own, my people, my family, my children? This mindset, I don't know whether you see the irony here. For a small number of people, you are acquiring a large amount of wealth, property, stuff, material. Do you see the ratios there? This is why there isn't ever enough for everyone in this world. But there is. But then you lay the fabric of ownership on top of all that, the lattice of ownership on resources. The moment you lay down the lattice of ownership on all these resources, now there just isn't enough for everyone. Because for a few, you have amassed a lot. Go back to our ancestors. That was not how it was. Back then, this hoarding culture, this how do I look after my own people, was not what they had in mind. Believe me if you can, ladies and gentlemen, back then, when a man would plant a tree, be that a mango tree or a jambu tree or whatever, or a jackfruit tree, some of the fruit they would set aside for the squirrels, the birds, the animals. They would not pluck all of it. See? So there was never me and mine, right? Even the animals were looked after. See how generous they were? Because generosity was part of their system, their ethos. There was always abundance. Now we don't have anything. Because we don't have generosity. That's gone down the drain. Now we don't have generosity. We simply have looking after myself and my people. Therefore, abundance is no longer synonymous with our culture, our traditions, who we are. Therefore, we have nothing. Therefore, we have to import everything. And when you import, the good, the bad comes with it. Therefore, this new way that we have got ourselves used to is slowly eating away at sea-helleness. The price we are paying for it is Nibbāna. That is why I'm speaking about it, not for any other reason. The price that we are paying for this is Nibbāna. Yeah, that's what we are here for, Nibbāna. That's what I'm here to represent, Nibbāna. That's why I speak about sea-helleness, for no other reason. This is not a nationalistic sentiment. I'm not a purist. I'm not racist. No, I'm Nibbānist. Therefore, I speak on behalf of Nibbāna, and what I'm trying to share with you is we had a culture, we had values that were conducive to Nibbāna. But once we start losing that, Nibbāna in a lay community becomes almost impossible. Don't tell me I didn't say so. So, keep it on the record. Put it on the record that I said so. That your teachers said this would happen. In the monastic community, this may happen in some places, but we can be careful not to let that happen to us. That is why Guru Hamra was very wise in his decisions as to how he set up the monastery. And said no personal beds, no personal rooms, no personal items. Everything belongs to the community. In our kitchens at the monastery, we cook. For whom? For anyone who walks through the doors, through our gates. Not just for the monks, for anyone who walks through those gates. Assume that there's someone who just came in just to take a meal. They don't want the sermon, they don't want the Dhamma. They're just hungry. They come in, they want to eat. What do you think we would do? Feed them. Do you think we ask them, what is your religion? You think we'd ask them that? What their religion was? What if they all came in bearing crosses? So what? What if they came in burqas? So? So what? What if a group of pusaris walked in? So what? They're human beings. They have hunger. Hunger is to be addressed. That is what we do in a kitchen. We address hunger. Whose hunger? No, hunger. Hunger. We tell them, now that you've eaten, why don't you stay for the sermon? But that's only an invitation. It's not a condition. We invite them to stay for the sermon so that they can get to a point where they don't feel hunger someday. So we try and fix the problem at the root. Because hunger is a very temporary problem to which, it's a permanent problem to which you give a temporary solution. Feeding. Feeding is not the permanent solution to hunger. But if you can cease birth, existence, then hunger is solved once and for all. So once again, the reason I speak about this with some element of passion is because our Sihela culture was part and parcel of the lay community's strategy for Nibbāna. It was part of the device for Nibbāna. If you remove that culture, totally eradicate that culture and become very westernized. Sorry for using that word westernized because it seems like something's really wrong with the Western world. That's not what I mean. Globalized even. In other words, if we remove what it means to be Sihela from a population who wish to attain Nibbāna, then Nibbāna becomes virtually impossible. So it's like removing the Shri from Lanka. Then we just become Lanka. Seriously. That will happen if it's not already happening. If our people stop giving either as an offering or as a support to a certain individual or a community. What I mean by is when you make an offering, you do it with devotion. When you give it because you want to support a community, right? Either one of these. If our people as a community, as a country, if we stop giving, then Sri Lanka will lose the Sri part. It will just be part of the name, but not who we are. It will just become Lanka. Our country is special for one reason, ladies and gentlemen, that is because here lives the word of the Buddha, the philosophy of the Buddha, the gift of the Buddha. Look across the world. When people talk about Sri Lanka, one of the first things they talk about? Buddhism. But not Buddhism as a religion, but where the word of the Buddha still survives, still thrives. It's not even spoken of that much even in India, where it all originated. In some parts of India, they don't even know much about Buddhism. But that was the prince's homeland. That's where he was born. We inherited it. But we were just so fortunate that the Buddha's Dhamma prevails in our country. Therefore, in parts of the world they are famous and for various things, right? So one part of the world will be famous for their technology. Other parts of the world will be famous for their industrialism. Another part of the world will be famous for cocoa. Another part of the world might be famous for its rubber. Another part may be for its milk. Another part of the world might be famous for sakura. This part of the world is famous for its philosophy, for Buddhism. Because people here, they don't just preach Buddhism, they live Buddhism. They practice Buddhism. And the practice of Buddhism is for the purpose of Nibbāna. But what I'm suggesting here, and what I'm really trying to open your eyes up to here is, if you remove parts of that culture, if you remove parts of those values, that value system, the virtues of what it is that supports the fabric, this whole system of Buddhist practice, and you simply leave the Tripitaka as a book to be read or studied, we will lose what it means to be Buddhist. And then we will become nobodies. Then Sri Lanka will not have anything to offer to the rest of the world. It's not education that we are famous for, right? That's why we send our children for education to other parts of the world. I mean, we have a few items of food, but that's not what we are famous for. They say we are famous for our hospitality, yes, but there are other parts of the world where are very hospitable. It's not the waterfalls or the forests. I mean, there are other parts of the world, other countries in which they have many of these things. So if you ask me, the one thing that we really have to showcase is our philosophy. But that will be lost if we lose our culture. And that is why I speak on behalf of that. So whatever you can in your homes, in your families, do try and preserve that. For your sake. For your sake. For your children's sake. So have an open heart. Surgery. Now have an open heart, have an open mind, have an attitude of openness and acceptance. Try and come out with this attitude of me, my family, my children. It's difficult to do. I know one lecture is not going to change any of this, not change much at all. But do try to think about at least what I'm saying here. Just try and think about what I'm saying. Take away this message, think over it. Regurgitate while you're having a cup of tea this evening. Think about what someone else is going on about today. Why did he talk about culture? Because you tell me that you cannot become monks, you can't come and become monastics with us. So you want the path to Nibbāna within your lay lives. For that to happen, you need culture. what it is that was Sri about your culture. That Sihela-ness, Sihelakama, that has to be there. Therefore, you need to study what was part of what made us Sri. What was this part? What part of it was the Sihela part? Parts of our culture, parts of how we interacted with our parents, our elders, our adults, our teachers, each other. What was our connection with the temple? Where did Dana come into the picture? Why did people offer Gilampasa? Why did people wake up in the morning and offer a glass of water to the Buddha? Why was that done? What was the purpose behind it? What were some of the Aurudu Sirit? Why were all of them done? Why was it always that whenever, before you ate, the first part was always offered to the father? Why was that? There were reasons behind all of this, ladies and gentlemen. The father's plate was always served first. That is not something we imported from somewhere. It was part of our culture because that supported our purpose of Nibbāna. Because first and foremost always got the first and foremost. It was not about the fact that he was the father. It was about offering the first and foremost to the first and foremost. Abstract concept. Take away individuals from this picture and think about the concept. That's what I mean. See how fortunate we are as a nation. Just imagine, just think about this. How meritorious we are to have 1 month or 1 day every month where the state has formally set aside for us to practice the noble path. Just imagine how meritorious we must be as a people. No other country has that. No other nation enjoys that privilege. 1 day every month set aside for spiritual practice. It's formally recognized. It's constitutionalized. Just think about it. I mean, these are rewards that we have earned as a people. So, the state has done what they have to do. The constitution has done what they have to do. The lawmakers have done what they have to do. Are we doing what we have to do? Where do you spend that poor day? That is the question, ultimately. So the poor day is now there. That's the thing, we are so good at making demands, aren't we? We are great at making demands. I want this, I want that, I want the other. Why can only they have it? Why can't we have it? But the moment it's given to you, we tend to take things for granted. Once it's given to us, we take it for granted, and then we don't use it for the purpose for which we went demanding it. That happens so much, so much. See, it was not one individual's effort to get these poor days set aside for spiritual practice. It was us all together as a country, as a nation. We earned that. I don't know when back in history that was set aside, but somewhere it happened, someday it happened. But it was the collective merit power of all of us. So if we now have earned that day, at least that day, 1 day a month, you have a good think about whether you're using that day for what it was set aside for. Is that the day where you plan your trips, shopping, parties? It's funny, isn't it, how on poor days the bars are all shut, but the night before there are long queues outside the bars. You wonder why, don't you? The night before Poya, go have a look on your way home or to work, whatever. Outside the bars, there are long queues. The taverns, long queues. Stocking up for Poya. stocking up for Poya. And the same at the butchers. I have no qualms about, what you do on Poya Day, what you drink, what you eat. I have no concern about that. My only concern is, my only point for consideration is, it was earned. Our people earned that day. It was not just a God-given gift, we earned it. We as a race, we as a people, we earned it, ladies and gentlemen. Our ancestors fought for it. They earned it. So now that we've earned it, that's 12 days of the year. We've earned that. Are we doing what we're supposed to do? Just think about why we as a people have been fortunate enough to earn 1 day a month. Why is it that the state agrees that 1 day a month at least should be set aside for one spiritual practice? Is it not because we as a nation, we are destined for something more than just mere existence? Why doesn't any other country have Poya days like we do? Is that not because we are destined for something? Is that not because our purpose must be something much greater than mere existence day on day? Food for thought. It's food for thought. So don't tell anyone else for not doing what you think is right or wrong. This is only a private message to a private gathering. You decide for yourself what is right for you. But I can tell you one thing for certain. I'll say this and we'll move on to talk about something. If you remove our culture, if you extract our culture from our people, we will lose what it means to be us. Because we as Sri Lanka, Sri Lankans, have nothing else to offer to this world. Yes, we have some tea, we have some rubber. What else do we have? Coconuts. No, we import it now. We are still importing a little bit of tea, but we are still exporting a little bit of tea, but we are also importing tea now. Surprise, surprise. So I think there's nothing we are not importing now, pretty much everything. I think mother and father are also imported now. So we're just about importing everything, which means we are not a source for anything anymore. There's nothing that we produce for this world. So we just become consumers. You can't survive like that. If you are merely a consumer, you can't survive in an ecosystem if you're merely a consumer. For an ecosystem to support you, you have to be a producer of something. Because it's a producer that always survives. Consumers perish. So we must be producing something. Think to yourself what that is. What are we good at producing? You think. What do we have that we are trying to take to the rest of the world? Think. What do most parts of the world have no clue about? What do most parts of the world think this is what it is, and they have distorted it out of all proportion, and it has become just a dramatic display of grandeur, and it's just another, I don't know what the word is. It's just become another show. Just become another show. Just another drama. But what is it that we have that is still very pure, very sublime, very clean, very noble, very direct? You think. So if that is what we are, if that is what we have for ourselves, then let's start producing that. And let's start exporting that so that we can become relevant in today's world. I don't think we can win with any other production. No other production can we win because every other country will take over, will surpass us by miles. We had technology long time ago. People still they wonder how they take water up to Rajagiriya. That technology we had with us a long time ago, but all of that got wiped out with other forms of technology which we started to import. So all of that was lost. Today we just marvel at it, but no one really knows how it happens. So that's the thing. So we don't have it then, really, do we? We have an artifact that's a showpiece. We say, look at Rajagiriya. Look at how people marvel at how they took water up to the top. But do we really know any? Does anyone really know now? So if we don't have the knowledge, then we don't have the technology, do we? That's just a museum. Rajagiriya is a museum. So we have a showpiece to tell the world, look at what we did. What we did, not what we are doing. Then that means we've lost it. It's like saying, we had so many arahants in this land. Woohoo! How do we make one? Oh, that we don't know. What's the point of saying there's gold behind this door, but I don't have a key? What's the point? I don't know how to open the door, but there's plenty of gold behind it. If only we could access it. Just imagine how nice life would be. But I don't have a key. And I don't know how to get through. What would be the point? Therefore, although we keep boasting about our prehistoric or our ancestors' technology and what things they did back then, we can marvel at them, but that's all we can do. We lost the skill, we've lost the know-how, we've lost the knowledge. It's not with us, therefore we've lost it. It's not there anymore. So if Sri Lanka is supposed to be the pearl of the Indian Ocean, you ask yourself, what is it supposed to be the pearl for? Is it our tea? Is it our coconut? Is it our rubber? Is it our labor force that we seem to keep exporting every day as not housewives, so, housemaids? Beg your pardon. As housemaids and menial workers, laborers, just keep exporting them, brain drain. Our best doctors, what do? There you go. Best engineers, there you go. Best educators, there you go. Best of everything, there you go. Only the best monks will remain, I tell you. Everyone else will go. Only the best monks will remain. That is why this is your only asset. If you consider yourself to be Sri Lankan, then the only asset you have is the Mahasangha, the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha. That's your asset, ladies and gentlemen. Protect it. Once we lose that, the noble triple gem, we have nothing. But that's okay, because if you have the noble triple gem, you have everything. Without the noble triple gem, you have nothing anyway. What's the point? It's about living for the day. What's the point? You can never achieve anything everlasting. Everlasting peace only comes through the Noble Triple Gem. Everlasting happiness only comes from the Noble Triple Gem, right? So you have everything you need, really. You don't need to beg, borrow and steal. You don't need to go to the other countries and say, please, can we have this? Please, can we have that? I mean, you will see politicians and people who run the country, they have to go and make pleas to other nations and say, can you bail us out? Can you give us this? Can you give us that? Can you give us some USBs? Can you give us some GBPs? Right? So they will do that. Let them do that. But you need to understand what your asset is. As a nation, what is our asset? What is our asset? The Noble Triple Gem is our asset. So how do you protect and preserve the Noble Triple Gem? By building a big stupa. Make a massive Buddha statue. Yeah? Shall we make copies of the Tripitaka? Thousands of copies of the Tripitaka. Then we'll put them into libraries. Shall we do that? Will that preserve the sasana? No, ladies and gentlemen. It all starts there. That's where it starts. It starts here. So if you want to preserve what it means to be Sri Lanka, start here. If you want to fight for, if you want to preserve what our ancestors fought for, what our ancestors gave their lives for, what our ancestors took the bullet for, and held out their chest when the sword pierced their hearts for. If you want to fight for that, then that fight starts here. Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. Nibbāna is the only thing that is our asset. The sasana is our asset. That is why it is called Sri. Uttum, great. Great Lanka. Great for what? You need to understand that. And I hope you do. Therefore, let's do it. Keep our culture, at least what part of it we can, because that is what will support you to get to Nibbāna. Through our culture, you will fulfill your paramita. Seriously. Our culture is a really good mechanism, a very good vehicle for you to fulfill your paramita. Dana paramita, sila paramita, upekka paramita, khanti paramita. The perfections. Our culture had a very sophisticated but yet very accessible way to help the lay community. The lay community particularly, to fulfill their paramita. So please understand that. Cricket is not our thing. We imported that. That's not what we are famous for. We won the World Cup once. We always talk about that, right? Long time ago we won the World Cup. So every day we talk about that. That's all we have to talk about. It's been what, 20 years now, isn't it? 30. Huh? 30. Yes. It's as long as the war. That's why whatever we become good at, someone will overtake us. Someone will surpass us. Except that one thing. Mark my words. Except that one thing. Whatever we are good at, someone will surpass us. Some other nation will surpass us. But at one thing they cannot do that. That is because our culture is what supports it. This culture is not to be seen in any other part of the world. The way that we interact with each other, the family relationships that we have, the way we treat our elders, our parents, our teachers, standing up when the teacher walks into the room, not shaking hands with teachers, having deep sense of devotion, respect towards our teachers. That's why in every school across the land, ladies and gentlemen, we need to have those basic values, otherwise we will lose who we are. Not just in the rural schools, it has to be in the urban schools as well. Not just in the government schools, but also in the private schools as well. It has to be part of who we are, otherwise we will lose who we are. That's why this competitive nature is not who we are. It doesn't sit comfortably with us. We are not competitive. We are collective. We don't compete with each other. We support each other. That is our nature. Who did the Buddha compete with? Only himself. The Bodhisattva only competed with himself. So this is the land of the Buddha. You know that. I'm not talking about religion. So if this is the land of the Buddha, is there no space for the Christians? Is that what I'm suggesting here? No room for the Muslims? No room for the Hindus? Is that what I'm suggesting? Certainly not. The Buddha was a philosopher. We weaved a whole bunch of religion around that. That's what happened. Then it became showcase Buddhism. But the Buddha was a philosopher. And in the next time I'm going to explain to you how good a philosopher he was. What was his philosophy? So let's talk about that. We have earned for ourselves a nickname, haven't we? Scientists in robes. People refer to us as scientists in robes. But the first scientist in a robe was born 2,500 years ago. He discovered the ways of science. He made a discovery about science that to this day, scientists are getting closer to discovering, but for that they're spending lifetimes in laboratories, trying to unveil the truth about the world. But this was a self-discovery that was made centuries ago. So he was the first scientist in a robe. That was his lab coat, this. But it was not experiment, observe, conclusion. It came to him through samadhi. His perfections were his experiments. Because there are two ways in which you can acquire knowledge, wisdom. One is you go into the laboratory, experiment, spend time, effort. The other way is through merit. That is also one way to get. Open up to wisdom, universal wisdom. And that is what the Buddha did. So I'm going to retell a story, something that I have been sharing with you over the last couple of weeks. But the last time I spoke about it, there were many of you in the room who got it, but there were also some who were very confused. So I'm going to retell that story. We talked about this yesterday in yesterday's sermon at the monastery. What I want to show you, ladies and gentlemen, is that what modern science has proven in their laboratories is something that the Buddha discovered many years ago. The reason I'm trying to juxtapose these two is to make this teaching available, accessible and palatable to the modern scientific thought and scientific schools and the scientific ways of thinking. Because the moment you start talking about faith, Oh, the Buddha, the glorious one. They're not interested. Because they are not interested in respect, devotion, honor. They're not even interested in that. They're very clinical, very scientific, very methodical. Has to be logical. Has to be able to be repeated. Has to be repeatable. So it has to agree with the scientific thinking and the scientific way of drawing out conclusions. And for that purpose, I wish to retell this story. I want you to listen to this very attentively and see whether there are people, individuals who you know, to whom you can now bring Buddhist thought, Buddhist philosophy in a way that they are prepared to accept. Because they are not those who are, they are not believers, they are not of faith, they don't have devotion, they don't have admiration or respect for the Buddha. To them, they're just another human being, just a man who lived centuries ago. So they will only accept what makes logical sense to them. Okay? So it is with that intent and in that light, I wish to retell this story to you. Because I believe that if we can do this, we can truly take the Buddha's message across the world. And I have asked you to be ambassadors of the Buddha's teaching. So in your circles, first of all, it has to make sense to you. But in your circles and the people that you are able to influence, I believe that if you can really grasp this message, you will start to see how this message can be taken to universities, scientists, laboratories, intelligent people, but to whom they will not accept it unless it comes through the scientific way of thinking. Because everyone accepts science. That's a general statement. Everyone accepts science. What they don't accept is the Buddha. Right. So let's do this then. I'm going to use the same example I used in yesterday's sermon. But in fact, the first place I used this example was here. So this is where a lot of the Dhamma is born. But then we took it one step further yesterday, and so I thought you are privy to that, and you of all people should be able to hear it, but also now begin to see how these two schools of thought, the scientific way of thinking and Buddhist philosophy, can really now be placed one on superimposed, and they fit perfectly. But don't just take my word for it, you be the judge of that. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you a mug. Right? So I'm going to put that on the board. So this is a mug, right? If you zoomed in, you would stop seeing a mug and you'll start seeing molecules. In fact, if I asked you what is this made of, this is ceramic. Yeah? So we'll put ceramic as the material. That's the substance that this is made of. It's wrong to say it's made of. This is ceramic. That's it. The mug is not made of ceramic. This is ceramic, right? But that's the problem. That is the problem. You think there's a mug here that's made of ceramic, when in fact this is just ceramic. That's it. So this ceramic, whatever it is, it's made of molecules. Again, it's wrong to say it's made of molecules. These are molecules. I have in my hand molecules, billions and billions of molecules. What are molecules again? So this is the scientific, this is what scientists would say, atoms. And if you go down one level further, we have electrons, protons, neutrons, and then some. So we can keep going. quarks and positrons and so on, but we can stop there for now. But one fine gentleman, some time ago, he came up and said that all mass, if sped at the speed of light, could be converted to energy. Right? So a kilogram of mass, if you make it travel at a velocity of 300,000 kilometers per hour, or per second. Per second? Second, right? Second. Then you can completely convert that mass to energy. So this was a quantification or conversion of mass to energy. So this formula basically says energy and mass are one and the same, only in different forms. Now, what is this, a mug? What is a mug? That's mass, isn't it? It's substance. So mass is substance. Any substance is mass. Ceramic, molecules, atoms, electrons, protons, neutrons, all of this is mass. But now, gifted with this knowledge, we know that mass is also energy. Therefore, give me one more answer to what I have in my hand. Energy. So this is energy. Are we all clear with that, on that? Crystal clear? Ceramic clear? So this is energy then. Right. Now, this form of energy, this formation of energy, this structure of energy, this arrangement of an, I'm throwing various words because one will make sense to you more than the others. But I'm throwing a bunch of words at you because what will make sense to one may not make sense to the other in just the same way. But they all mean the same thing. Right? So this is an arrangement of energy, which is different to, say, this arrangement of energy. Isn't this also, according to this rule, just energy? And every other object here? What am I? Energy. What are you? Energy. It is said, in fact, I worked out the numbers, that if you take an average human being, say 80 kilos of a human body, that is enough energy, they say, to provide the entire world's population with its energy requirement for 4 days. Can you imagine that? That's how much energy there is in a unit mass. So really mass is just condensed energy. So if you took one human body, 80 kilograms worth, and you convert it entirely to energy using this formula, that's enough energy to sustain the entire world's population for 4 full days. Do you see how much energy you consume then? You are hoarders. And I'm here talking to you about Nibbāna. There's no shortage of energy in this world. There's plenty of energy. It's all in you. That's the problem. So then this is energy, right? Now, do you recall the last time I spoke to you about this mug? I asked you what it is used for and why you call it a mug. You all agree that it is because you could put liquid into this, right? Potentially water, and this can be a water bearer, a water holder. And then soon after that, I removed the water and I put some pens in it. At which point you said this was a pen holder. And then, as if by accident, it wasn't planned actually, took some flowers and just left them here, and then he said, there we have a vase. And then I removed the flowers out of it and I started tapping away at it, and you said it was a drum. So then I had to come back to you and ask the question again, well, what is it then? Can someone just talk to the children just to keep them quiet for a little while longer? Otherwise they're disrupting you and that's not good for them. Nicely. Otherwise they won't come back again. So where were we? So I asked you the question, then what is this? Is this a mug? Is this a pen holder? Is this a vase? Or is it a drum? Now you're lost because you cannot give any one answer, because whatever answer you give, it's only going to be one of many. Yeah? Therefore you can't be deterministic about this. And you can't say that this is just one thing and nothing else. Agreed? Okay. So then, this is what we did yesterday. I said, just imagine if we were to cut out a part of this. Okay? So now, initially, let's say, think of this as a cup, and I cut out this part. Imagine I bore this part out of this cup. Would you still say that this was a cup? Why not? Exactly. Because you can't use it as a cup anymore. You can't use it as something that can hold liquid. Yes? So, what we have essentially done is by cutting out a part of this, we have taken away, we have taken away a characteristic that this object exhibited a moment ago. What characteristic was that? It was the ability to hold water, to contain water. But the moment I take this part out, it can no longer be used to hold water, therefore we'll have to agree that it no longer holds that characteristic. It doesn't exhibit that characteristic anymore. Does that make sense to everyone? It's a very simple concept, but we are getting somewhere. I just want to take one step at a time and check that your footing is good, so you don't fall. Are we all clear on that? Great. So then, when I take this part out, now if the whole thing is energy, what is that part? If this entire object is energy, what is that part then? It's also energy, isn't it? So then when I say that I bore this part out, when I cut this part out, what I've essentially done is, from this entire quantity of energy, I've just done what? Taken out, removed a small part of energy. Therefore, the only thing that's really happened in Dhamma is the amount of energy has changed. Reduced, changed, whatever. Therefore, from a collection of energy, I have removed a smaller collection of energy, a quantity of energy. Do you see then, the moment I make changes to this aggregation, this collection of energy, certain characteristics begin to change. Does that make sense? Right now, there's enough energy here in a particular arrangement that you put water into it and it will hold it. That is a characteristic of this, what? Energy. Well done. Right now, the energy that's in my hand exhibits that characteristic. You put water, it holds it. But if you take out some part of that energy, now you could take this part of that energy out, but that wouldn't happen. If I took out that part of energy, you can still use it as a water container. But if I took out that part, then this can no longer be used as a water container because it would not exhibit that characteristic. Fair enough? Excellent. But couldn't we still use it as a pen holder? Absolutely, we could do that, couldn't we? Yeah. Well then, if you say that, what I'm going to do next is take out even more energy. So all these places that I'm marking are places where I'm going to take out energy. So now I want you to imagine this, what cup? Now it's no longer a cup because I've just taken out this part, so it's no longer a cup. So now it has to be a pen holder, right? But now from that pen holder, I'm going to remove even more energy. So the moment I've done that, would you still call this a pen holder? Because why not? Well, clearly, it can no longer hold any pens. Because, there's still a little bit of material here, not material, energy. There's still a little bit of energy here, but there isn't enough energy to hold a few pens. Therefore, pen holder is no longer a characteristic that this energy represents or exhibits. Are we all clear on that? Put your hand up if that's not clear. Wow, what a wonderful audience you are. Marvelous. Excellent, then one step further. This can still, though, be used as a vase. Because if I can just place the stem just on this part, right? Just on this, all of this is gone. Now you have to imagine this in your mind, but this part is still there, right? This, can you see? This part? The ceramic, where the ceramic is still there. Yeah? So if I can just place the stem of the flower there, then it can still be used as a flower vase. Okay? Now I'm going to take all of that energy out. Now this is essentially just a cylinder. With no base on either side. I mean, essentially what I've done is do this to that side. Yes? So now imagine this, I'm not going to call it a cup anymore, because it would be wrong to call it a cup anymore. I'm going to hold this energy, but without any of that. Now imagine that in your minds. Can I use this as a vase anymore? No. How did it go from a collection of energy that exhibited the characteristic of a vase to now no longer exhibiting that characteristic? What happened? Exactly. Excuse me. All I did was remove a quantity of energy. That's what happened. Do you see then already, you must have begun to see already now, as we remove energy, characteristics begin to change. Could I not put that energy back and regain those characteristics? I certainly could. So if I put back that bit of energy that was there before, it can regain the purpose of a vase. If I put a little bit more of it back, then again I get back the pen holder. If I put all that energy back again, I get the cup again. But if I start removing it back again, then those characteristics begin to change. So you see, this shifting of characteristics is a product of what? Change of energy. Wonderful. Therefore, is it fair to call this a cup? Or is it fairer to actually say this is just energy of a certain composition in a certain arrangement which exhibits the characteristics of holding water, holding liquid. And to that characteristic, we give a name, cup. Because to say the characteristic of holding liquid is a mouthful. Can I have a characteristic of holding liquid with some beer in it, please? Would not be a great conversation starter at the bar, would it? Or even at the coffee shop? Now the barrister would be fed up of that. So instead we have these simple words that we have come up with. These are for convention, therefore for convenience. We have names. In fact, these names are nothing more than shortened, abbreviated representations of what? What's the magic word? Characteristics, ladies and gentlemen, characteristics. So when I say the word cup, in your mind, you should be thinking characteristics. What characteristic? The ability to retain liquid, not just water, liquid. Water is the one that first comes to mind always. But this is also a penholder, because there's enough energy here for it to exhibit the characteristic of holding pens. And there's enough energy here to exhibit the characteristic of holding flowers. But if you keep on draining energy from this system, there'll come a point where none of these characteristics would be exhibited. But we still remain with one. It's useful on a trip. When you go on a trip with friends. What for? Here's a drum. But if I continued draining energy, won't there come a point where it will stop serving that purpose as well? Therefore, what is a drum after all then? What is a drum? Indeed, it's just an aggregation of energy that exhibits a certain characteristic. What is a penholder then? Same goes. What's a vase then? What's a cup then? What's just about anything then? What's the roof? What's the floor? What are these bulbs, lights, curtains, whiteboard, pen, body? Do you see that all there is just energy and their compositions and their arrangements? And these compositions and arrangements, see, you have to be mindful. That's why I placed it this side up. Otherwise, you're going to get the ink on the tablecloth. Because I must have done that once, that's why I got it on my hand. Karma. So what do we have here then? What do we have in this world? What is this world? Energy, just energy. Numerous compositions of energy, but composed in a certain arrangement. They're unique only in their arrangement, ladies and gentlemen, and their composition, that's all. But we ascribe a very different kind of uniqueness to them, which we need to talk about in just a moment. So what do scientists say? What does the scientist say this is? The physicist, what does the physicist say this is? Energy, see? He says this is energy. You can say, no, it's a mug. Well, then the scientist says, well, hold on. A mug is just mass, and mass is just energy, therefore it's just energy. So whatever you put here, they're always going to keep coming back with, no, it's just energy, it's just energy. Bring in an elephant, what would the scientist say? Energy. In fact, that's why an elephant eats. Why? Because it has to sustain a certain amount of energy. That's why we eat. This is our source of continued supply of energy, because that is what you are. I mean, if you are anything other than energy, that it is that you would have to eat. Don't you think so? Did that make sense? If you are anything other than energy, whatever that is what you would have to eat. So if you are human, scary thought, then you would have to be cannibals. But how come we can just be vegetarian and remain non-vegetarian? Huh? What I meant was, you are not a vegetable, are you? At least most of the time. You are muscle, you are animal, You are, in fact, if someone were to eat you, that would be considered, not someone, let's say an animal ate you, that would be, you'd say that was a carnivorous animal, meaning you are animal stuff. But you can still eat vegetarian, be vegetarian and be animal stuff. Yeah? See, how is that possible? You got to think. How come you can just eat non-animal stuff and still be animal? That's what I meant by, how can you be a non-vegetarian in your diet and be, no, I got that wrong. How can you be vegetarian in your diet and be non-vegetarian in your composition? You're non-veg, but you eat veg. In fact, you could eat just veg and you'd still be non-veg. Meaning, what you're eating is not veg. It's just energy. Therefore, veg or non-veg, what are you? Energy. Does that make sense? Thank you. That's why the scientists would always agree, no matter what you put into this side of the equation, be that a mug, a monkey, whatever, ceramic, metal, glass, stone, rock, the Himalayas, you put in a planet, put in Jupiter on this side, what would the scientists say? That's just energy. So the whole universe put onto this side, what would the scientists say? The entire universe. Energy. Are we clear with that? All good so far? Right. So then this is what? Energy. But do you see again that when we manipulate energy, take in bits of it out, put bits of it back, characteristics change. So then there is a relationship between energy composition and characteristics. Yes? The composition of energy seems to be directly proportional to characteristics. So if you want to change a characteristic, what must you change? Composition of energy. By composition, I also mean arrangement, not just the quantity, but also the arrangement of it. Okay, so I'll just use one word, composition. So if you want to change a characteristic, what must you change? So the first question was this: if you want to change, the question was, if you change energy composition, what changes? Characteristics change. That's what changes. If you want to change characteristics, what must you change? Energy composition. Now that's the relationship they have with each other. So then we can come to a generalized conception and understanding about the world. What is that generalized understanding? All there is just energy. And when energies combine, when energies aggregate, when energies compose and arrange themselves in certain ways and forms, you get various characteristics. But although that is the truth about this world, our ignorant minds perceive something very different to that. So much so, as I referred to yesterday, the very scientist who takes this cup, this bit of energy, he walks into the laboratory and he says, yep, it's all just energy. And then he walks out of the laboratory and he says, well, that's a nice cup. So now all of a sudden he starts talking about cups. But all there is energy. See, the reason, what's going on here, ladies and gentlemen, is our minds don't perceive what our eyes see. We create an alternative reality in our minds. But this is not true reality. We fabricate a world in our minds. And once we do that, you look at this composition of energy and you start to give it names And not just that, you start to entify this. To entify is to identify something as an entity. That is what entification means. The mind entifies this. What is this? Energy. That's it. But what does the mind tell you this is? A cup. See, if I took out this part, meaning I took out this energy, now the mind will tell you that, your mind will tell you that this is a broken cup. Would it not? How wrong that is. To say that this is a broken cup. Therefore, a drum is what? A broken cup. A penholder is a broken cup, is it? A vase is a broken penholder. Then a drum is a broken cup, a broken penholder, a broken vase. Is that what a drum is? No, you see, we start talking about broken things, things breaking, things deforming, things changing, because we are talking about things. This is the magic word, things. 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 We think that this world is full of things. When they have life when they don't have life in them, we call them. Go back to grade 3. Non-living things. And when they have life in them, we call them. See, you remember, well done. But ultimately, this world is full of what? Things. Also, the mind thinks. Now, this is where the scientist is completely bamboozled. He is confused. Because he goes into the laboratory and he realizes that all this is energy. This is just energy. But then if this is just energy, why do I still feel that this is a cup? No, he never stops to ask this question because he doesn't know that there's something wrong with him. Because he, she, us, we've all taken it for granted that what our minds perceive must be what reality is. You know, we've never stopped to think whether what we think might not always be the truth. It's like when you're in a dream. What is your reality? It's the dream, isn't it? In your dreams, do you ever come to your senses? I'm just dreaming. This is not true. Can you ever gain that sense of consciousness in a dream while you are in a dream? No, because that is the hallmark of a dream. If you knew that you were in a dream, then that's not a dream. So you can only reflect on a dream after you've woken up. But while you're in your dream, that is your reality. The issue is, the mind is the same when it's ignorant. The ignorant mind knows not that it is ignorant. Repeat after me. The ignorant mind knows not that it is ignorant. So how do you come out of it? No, you have an even better question. Why come out of it? See, if when you are asleep, you knew that you were asleep, why would you need the alarm? That's the simplest question I have to get you to think about this. It's the same concept. I mean, if you knew you were asleep while you were asleep, you don't need the alarm then, right? You know you're asleep, you always know you're still asleep, you're still asleep. Now you've been sleeping for the last 5 hours, it's time to wake up. So you wake up. Why do you need the alarm? Why do you need an alarm to wake you up? Because when you're asleep, you don't know that you're asleep. Therefore, you always need an external stimulus. You need an external hand. So, in sasanic terms, we call that a kalyana mitra. But in the mundane world, it's your alarm. What your alarm does to you is what the kalyana mitra does to you in the sasana. He or she wakes you up from a sleep that you didn't even know you were in the first place. That's the beauty of a kalyana mitra. Two exceptions: Samma Sambuddhas, Pacceka Buddhas. The only two exceptions. Samma Sambuddhas and Pacceka Buddhas, they wake themselves up. That's why we call them the awakened ones. See, you don't say the alarm awakes you. The alarm wakes you. Yeah? The alarm woke me up. You don't say the alarm awoke me up. Yeah? But the Buddha is what? The woken up? Or was he woken or awakened? He was awakened. Meaning, there was no external support for that. It happened within. But for us, it's a very different story. We cannot awaken ourselves. We need to be woken up. We need an alarm. That's why in the sasana we have what we call the kalyana mitras. So only one who has woken up or has been woken up by someone else, or someone who is awakened by oneself, can wake up someone else, another individual. Now you understand how this lineage in the sasana is dependent on the kalyana mitra. That's why reading the Tripitaka won't do. Because the Tripitaka is not awake. It's a book of knowledge. So that's a bit of a sidestep. But let's come back to the discussion. So this world is full of what? What do we think it's full of? Things. We think the world is full of things. When we see life in them, we call them living things. And when there's no life in them, when they're inanimate, we call them non-living things. But either way, they're what? Things. But what did Einstein say? That it's just energy. These are formations of energy, collections of energy. But even Einstein, although he comes up with that theory, he looks at an object and he says, what a fine thing that is. He can't come out of the thing-based thinking. So in this world, there are thingamabobs. There are things in these worlds, in our world. That's why you are a thing. You are a thing. The person next to you it's another thing. And in this world there are 8 billion living things. We call them human living things. And an infinite also number of animals. So the whole world is full of living things and non-living things. But the truth is much further than that. Nothing could be further from the truth than to think that the world is full of things, ladies and gentlemen. There is no such thing in this world. All there is just energy and compositions of that energy. And this energy is very dynamic. Now, it makes no sense to say very dynamic, it's just dynamic. Because there are no degrees of dynamicity, it's just dynamic. So there are no fixed things. I mean, there are no things at all, but fixedness is not a characteristic of this world, because if fixedness can only be so if there were things in this world. See, when you think of this as a cup and the handle breaks, comes off, in our layman terms, what do we say? The cup is broken. But what do the scientists say? There was more energy then, less energy now. Does he use the word broken? No, right? And when we made holes here, we still say the cup is broken. But what would the scientists say? No, there was more energy, now less energy. See, when you start talking about energy, you have to drop these words like breaking, aging. All of those things are gone. Destruction, construction. Because nothing is constructed, nothing is destructed. This is just energy accumulating, aggregating, and exhibiting characteristics. So how does all this sit with Buddhist philosophy then? So this is all very physical. This is a very physical look at what's going on. So now we know that there aren't these things called things, it's just energies, but how does all this sit? Because that is the premise of our discussion. What I said at the beginning was, I want to show you that what the Buddha said was what scientists have discovered much later down the line. The Buddha speaks of three characteristics: anicca, dukkha, and anatta. As I said to you a couple of weeks ago, anicca, dukkha, and anatta are in fact characteristics of energy. It's not some weird spiritual doctrine, abstract and absolved from everything else you have to do in life. No. Because you see, the thing is this, if all there is in this world is energy, both mind and matter, if all there is energy, and the Buddha comes into this world to teach us about the world, then whatever he teaches us has to be about what? Energy. Simple as that, right? If the entirety of whatever is there is energy, and the Buddha's purpose of teaching his findings is to teach us about the world, then whatever he has taught us has to be about energy. So anicca, dukkha, and anatta are characteristics of energy. How so? How so are they characteristics of energy? Well, that's exactly what you saw happening here. Anicca is the characteristic of being unbiased. It's a characteristic of being unbiased. So energy is inherently unbiased. It has no bias. It has no tendency. It has no affiliations. It has no affinity. It has no desire. It has no wish or want or preference. Energy is like that. See, if you want to get energy out of a battery, do you think energy has any preference as to which things that it would be happy to support? So can you only take energy out of a battery to do certain things but not other things? No, because energy has no preference. A battery is just it's a collection of energy, chemical energy. You can convert it to electrical energy and use it for whatever you want. No preference there. Well, this is also energy. And energy by its very nature inherently has no preference. So all of this stuff, which is what? What is this? Energy has no preference. There is no bias here. Is that part clear to everyone? Right. If that part's clear, then there must remain another question in your mind. Immediately after you've understood that part, which is, well, if energy has no preference, Swaminathan said, why has it taken this form then? Yeah, if this has no preference, why take this form? What is the answer there? Necessity. Necessity is the reason energy has taken this form, meaning there was a void that was created. The moment there's a void, now energy fills that void, simply to fulfill that necessity. Take away the necessity, and energy has no part to play, no role to play. That's why these are called forms. Rupa. Forms. They're called forms because energy takes the form of the necessity. Whatever form necessity takes, it is that form energy takes. It's much like when you put water into this. What shape does it take? The shape of the cup, or the mug. That is because this is the form of that necessity. You want to hold liquid in this shape, this form, this is why you have taken a container of this form. Therefore, whatever liquid you put into this is going to take that shape. Likewise, this mug itself has taken this shape because there was a necessity. There was a form, or rather there was a necessity for this. Therefore, the moment you throw energy at this, where there was a form, or where there was a necessity, energy took up arrangement, that structure, shape of that necessity. That is what you see here. This is the characteristic of dukkha. The characteristic of dukkha is energy always takes the form of necessity. That is what dukkha means. What does anicca mean? Energy has no bias. Has no bias, has no preference, has no desire, has no way it wants to be. Which is fortunate. Because it has no way it wants to be, it has no way it wants to be, whatever way we want it to be, it takes that shape. Does that make sense? It's like, if you're in a classroom, if the children want to be a certain way, that's a headache to the teacher. Is it not, teachers? Because what you want is a child who doesn't have a way that they want to be, so they will always comply with whatever your request is, whatever your demand is. But if there's a child who you say is mischievous or stubborn, what does that mean? They have a way they want to be. Energy is inherently what? It's not stubborn. What is the opposite of stubborn? Obedient? Okay, so energy is inherently obedient. It is not stubborn. Does that make sense if I put it in those terms? Energy is obedient. Therefore, whenever you demand, whenever you create necessity, energy complies. So energy's compliance rate is what? 100%. Wouldn't you love to have an organization of employees who are like that? The boss calls the shots and everyone marches in uniformity. Whatever you say, they are willing to do and comply. But why is it difficult to run an organization? Because compliance is not at 100%. But energy is not like that. Energy's compliance rate is 100%. Because energy has no bias, no preference. That is what anicca means. A lack of preference. To be void of preference, to be void of ways that it wants to be. That is what anicca means. So what does dukkha mean then? Compliance. Make a demand and energy complies. So what do you see here then? This is dukkha, meaning a necessity was created here, and the moment energy was thrown into the picture, it promptly took up that shape, therefore compliant. This is what dukkha means. Finally, what does anatta mean then? Anatta is, what anatta says, or what anatta means is that besides compliant energy, which is what this is, besides compliant energy, there is nothing fixed about this. There is no entity here. There is no separate object here. There is no thing here. There is no thing here. Because a thing would be a thing. It would be an entity. It would be fixed. It would have a way. It would have a preference. It would have a structure. It would have a way it has to be. So then when this comes off, you'd say the thing is broken. But there's no thing here. All this is just compliant energy. Because this is a dukkha, not a thing, not a self, not an entity. That is what anatta means. So what did the Buddha say then the world was? Anicca, dukkha, anatta. What does a scientist say? Same. Scientists say, this is just energy, taken this form, and nothing more than that. Take energy out, characteristics change. Put energy back in, characteristics change. That's what the Buddha said as well. He said all there is just energy that comply to necessity. It complies to necessity. And that's it. There's nothing more than that. Anatta. There's no atta. You've heard this word shunyata? It's a certain word that gets thrown around a little bit, sometimes too often. Shunyata means nothing. Understand nothing in this sense. There is no thing. Yes. Yes, this is not a thing. This is just an aggregation of energy. So there's a samadhi called Shunyata Samadhi, which you might have heard. In certain meditation schools and so on, they'll talk about Shunyata Samadhi. Sometimes what they say is empty your thoughts. I've heard it in some places, some books really. What they say is to empty your mind of thoughts. Don't think about anything. Don't think about yesterday, don't think about tomorrow, don't think about, not even about the present. Not even about your breath. So initially they say focus on your breath, and after a while, don't even think about your breath. Don't think about anything. I think half the time people fall asleep. Because it's difficult to, unless you go to Nirodha Samapatti, which is a deep state of absorption where your mind stops. See, what is a mind after all? Arammana Vijnana Lakkana, right? It is the processing of an object. So how can you have a mind that doesn't think about anything? Because what is a mind after all? It's the processing of an object, isn't it? Either a sight object, sound object, smell object, taste object, touch object, or a mental object. So how can you have thoughts that don't think about anything? Because the thought is thinking about something. That's why I say half the time, I think when people come out and say, that was a niyama, she should ruin the samadhi. I truly think that, they've just fallen asleep and they just felt like they were not thinking about anything because they were deep in sleep, and then they woke up or their bell went off and they were woken up and they said, yeah, that was a wonderful meditation session. I thought about nothing. No, they were just asleep half the time. But now do you understand what Shunyata Samadhi is? It's the contemplation there. There is no thing here. That is not suggesting that there is absolutely none. There is what? Aggregation of energy. This is why these are called skandhas. Skandha is an aggregation. This is what it is, an aggregation of energy. Why this form though? Necessity. That was determined by necessity. So change the shape of necessity, you change the shape of form. That's what there is, but not a thing, not a fixed thing, not an entity that breaks or ages or cracks. That cannot happen, because for that to happen there has to be a thing. Things break, things age, things crack, things can be mended. But if all there is energy, how can any of that happen? So, last words then. This is the discovery the Buddha made centuries ago. And then one smart person came along and said, E equals mc squared. And the whole world revered that individual and said, wow, he is the scientist of our times. When all the while there was a scientist, but only he was in a robe. So he was seen as a spiritual leader, a religious leader, not considered a scientist. That's why I say not all scientists come in lab coats. What I want the world to understand is to shake off this feeling that the Buddha was a religious person. He was the greatest mind ever to have roamed the surface of the earth. Out of the power of sheer perfections that he fulfilled over the many eons of rebirth in samsara, sacrificing everything. Because at the time he was ignorant when he was making all those sacrifices. He was not a Buddha then, he was just a Bodhisattva. Out of all that labor, all that love, all that compassion, all that kindness, he created the necessity for a Buddha. And then under that Bodhi tree, that's what happened. He awakened. Once he awakened, he realized that all there is energy, and energy is of this nature. He discovered the characteristics of energy. And then he said all sentient beings, all matter, all objects, all things, living or non-living, are essentially just energy, anicca, dukkha and anatta. Therefore, there is no basis for us to separate ourselves and individualize ourselves and personify ourselves and say that you are you and I am I, and therefore all this heartache, all this rife, all these battles, all these wars, all this animosity, anger, hatred, jealousy, all happens between what? Individuals. There was no reason, rhyme or logic behind any of that. Once the Buddha realized that all of this was just energy. So please take away this message that the Buddha was a scientist in a robe. What he discovered back then, scientists later went into laboratories in their lab coats and experimented. And then they came up with something. But the problem is those scientists of today, modern day scientists, they can explain E equals mc squared, but what they cannot tell you is why they still feel, when they look at an object, that it's a thing. They cannot work out why they feel that way. When all of science disproves that. When science itself denies that, the existence of things, why do they still feel that there are things in this world? That is because of jati. That is because of jati. Jati is the disease of the mind that makes it perceive an alternative reality. And that alternative reality, once it happens in the mind projects it into the world that it perceives. Therefore, what is merely a composition of energy, the mind projects an alternative reality and it says, this is a cup. Therefore, cups break, cups age. And the same thing goes for us, our parents, they age. That's why the Buddha says, Jati Pacchaya Jara, Jati Pacchaya Marana, Jati Pacchaya Vyadi. See, old age, disease, death. These three are essentially side effects of jati. Meaning, the moment you identify something, now they age, they decay, and they die. Won't that happen to this cup? Of course. It will decay, it will age, and it will die. But that's because this is a cup. If it's just energy, no such thing has happened. Composition of energy changes, that's it. This doesn't decay, this doesn't break, this doesn't die. But once you consider this to be an entity, now you have attachments towards that entities and expectations of that entity. But you see, the moment you realize that there are no entities in this world and merely aggregations of energy, there is no longer a basis for expectations. That's how expectations cease in the Arahant. And it begins to start ceasing in the Sotapanna. Until then, as a Pruthagjana, as much as you might know that expectations are a cause of heartache, you cannot stop yourself from setting them. Because it's not you who does it. It happens. You don't set expectations, they happen. Why do they happen? Because you perceive entities. You perceive things, living and non-living, when there aren't any. Where should this stuff get published? Science Today? I don't know. I hope the world hears these messages. For you, this is just for your Nibbāna. But if, as it was once prophesied, this philosophy is going to be the prevalent philosophy in the world one day, I feel that the only way that can happen is if we can help the scientific community realize that the Buddha was not a spiritual leader of some sort, of no relevance to them. He was some religious man who went around with his bald head, talking some religion and giving precepts out to everyone, talking about some rebirth stuff that people just can't make sense of, and hells and heavens and what would happen to them if they did bad and sin and so on, of no relevance to us. I think we're going to have to step away from that. Take out faith, take out belief, and instead replace it with that intellectual thought. Appeal to the intellectual audience, because for them, that will have to come first. Once that is the precursor, followed from that will come faith. Then will come devotion. Then will come respect and admiration. Oh my gosh, for someone to have come up with this by themselves, without a university degree, how did they manage that? Then you say, that is the perfect one. That is the self-awakened one. That is why he is the supremely enlightened one. That's how they'll get down on their knees. For whose sake? For their sake. So, help me with this mission. To take this Dhamma to the world. Like I said yesterday, I can explain this in Sinhalese, I can explain this in English. After a while, I'll try my best to explain this in Spanish. But there's a whole world out there. And one voice, two voices, a few voices can't do this. Now you understand why we learn all these languages? Should this not reality be explained in Arabic, in Hebrew, in Italian, in Chinese, in German, in French? Should it not? In Hindi and Telugu? Well, there you go. So we are learning our languages so that when this knowledge comes to us, when this wisdom arises within us, then we are ready, equipped with language to then take this message throughout the world to an audience that does not accept the Buddha. That's okay. Don't accept Buddha. Accept the message. Take the message because the message is a scientific one. No, they can't deny that. So, help me with the mission. Why are we building a language center? The project that you all started? Why are we building a language center? Therefore, so to take this message in many different languages to every weeping heart, to every crying soul, to every individual who has sleepless nights because of fear and worry and grief. Because they're human beings just as us. They are brothers and sisters as well. Across the ocean or here, matters not. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, right? One world, one family. Then, if people in my family have to be healed, then my family is the whole world. I want you to understand what mission you are part of, ladies and gentlemen. Bear that with pride. Be part of that mission. If to support that mission you have to put some food into my alms bowl, do that. Don't feed me. I'm an able person. I can go and feed for myself. But if I have to go around doing a job to find my living, to make a living for myself, then I'm not going to have the time to practice this and take this message to the rest of the world. Then I'll have to focus on that. That's why I say, if you want to put some food into my alms bowl, do. But with this mission in mind. This is why you do that. This is much bigger than I am. I'm minuscule compared to this. Put a roof above our head. Yes. I can ask you for things without hesitation because I'm not asking it for myself. I'm asking you to join the mission. This mission. Thank you for teaching us languages. Thank you for giving us the stationery. Thank you for giving us the books. Thank you for giving us teachers. Thank you for creating opportunities. Thank you for looking after us. Thank you for feeding us. Thank you for giving us shelter. Thank you for giving us clothing and medicines. Thank you for teaching our children because one day they will take this message to the rest of the world. Be part of this mission. Be a missionary. I will do what I have to do. I promise you that. I will do what I have to do if it's the last thing I do. You do what you have to do. Start within yourself and then play it forward. That's my call. Answer. Right, no time for Pindapata today either. It's my fault today, not yours. Right, let's call it today then. Does all that make sense to you? Yes? Perfect. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Let's take a moment then, ladies and gentlemen, to transfer the merits that we have all acquired today. By making offerings to the infinite virtues of the Noble Triple Gem, inviting the Swami Master to deliver the sermon, as well as creating a conducive environment for all to come along and practice the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma, contemplating the Dhamma and reflecting on it for your own salvation. First and foremost, let us transfer these merits to the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, upasakas and upasikas throughout the world who have made it their life's effort to protect and preserve the sublime teachings of the Buddha and passed it down to the generations of the noble lineage in the form of the Tripitaka, which is thankfully available to us today to study, understand and comprehend the Dhamma. Let us transfer this message to the Mahanayaka Theras and the Anunayaka Theras of all the chapters, as well as all the monks and nuns throughout the world who practice the Dhamma and practice the path to seek liberation. Let us also transfer this message to the monks and nuns resident in your local temples and nunneries who have always been by your side through thick and thin, come rain or shine. Let us transfer this message to my teacher Guru Swami Mahanse, as well as all the monks resident in the monastery and the Anagarikas and Anagarikas attached to the monastery. Let us also transfer this message to our devotees and friends of the monastery who, for the sake of merits to help them attain the supreme bliss of Nibbāna, continue to sustain the Mahasangha. This includes all of you who provide the Mahasangha with shelter, alms, robes and medicines, as well as pass on your know-how and continue to extend their well wishes. Let us also transfer this message to our mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews and nieces, our friends, our acquaintances, our teachers, our employers, employees, and anyone and everyone who helped us, supported us and assisted us in many ways and shapes and forms. May by the power of these merits they be healed of any physical and mental ailments and overcoming obstacles to their spiritual progress. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbāna. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also transfer this message to the Devas and Brahmas, spirits and demons, primarily the Sakadeva, as well as all the famous gods and deities who have committed themselves to fulfill and preserve the Sambuddhasasana. Let us transfer this message to our guardian deities who keep a watchful eye over us and keep us out of harm's way. May they prosper in divine power and wisdom. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbāna. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also transfer this message to our forefathers, our ancestors, our loved ones, those who passed away in our name, reminding ourselves that it is in their blood, sweat and tears today we are able to enjoy the comforts of life as we do. Let us also transfer this message to members of the armed forces as well as the police force who have sacrificed their lives for the peace and harmony of our nation, as well as those who lost their lives in disasters and natural calamities such as tsunamis and earthquakes, landslides, fires, floods and pandemics and so on, reminding us that in this infinitely long journey of samsara they will all have been parents of ours, siblings of ours, friends of ours, people who have been of resistance to us, who will have gone an extra mile on our behalf to help us, support and assist us. And therefore, with an abundance of compassion, loving kindness, and a sense of gratitude for all that they have done for us, let us transfer these merits to them. May by the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in the woeful planes, they be redeemed and be born in the blissful plane. May by the power of these merits, they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbāna. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may by the power and blessings of all the merits we have acquired throughout the day, we will be able to witness the advent of many hundreds or thousands of Arahants on this blessed land. And finally, may you and I and everyone who has helped make this program a success become a Rahatan Vahanse or an Arahat Theranin Vahanse in this very life itself and in the era of the Sri Sambuddhasasana itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the blessings of the Noble Triple Gem always be with you. The members of the Mahasangha will transfer the blessings to you. Rajagiriya Dveshaginnan midatva Mohaginnan midatva Nibbāna parama sukhayan Sukhita taravatva Nibbāna parama sukhayan Sukhita taravatva Mamadasya loloka Siyalu satvayo Nibbāna parama sukhayan Sukhita taravatva Nibbāna parama sukhayan Sukhita taravatva Nibbāna parama sukhayan Sukhita taravatva Rajagiriya dvesha gini niveva moha gini niveva nivan sapa laleva nivan sapa laleva nivan sapa laleva. So we see Ananta Mahaguna Balen Siruloka Siru Satyoma Nibbāna Parame Sukhen Sukta Darvetva Sadhu Sadhu Sadhu.